question and answer segment at the end of the discussion session. If you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask. Please use the raise hand feature of Zoom in order to maintain the queue. If you are not speaking, please mute yourselves in order to minimize the disturbances. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Thank you, Prajwal. Namaskar. Welcome everyone. Now we are continuing our discussion on the philosophy of RāMāNUJā. It's called the Viśiṣṭādvaita philosophy. And we are discussing till the previous session we were discussing some of the most distinct contributions of RāMāNUJā to philosophy of religion, because RāMāNUJA's system is more of a philosophy of religion than a metaphysical system, because it's all about, its main emphasis is on devotion to God, having a vision and grace of the Lord, liberation through grace and self-surrender. In many areas, there are some similarities between the mystical aspects of Christian tradition and RāMāNUJA's system. The emphasis on some kind of a transcendental mystical experience, which is called prapatti, or self-surrender and liberation in RāMāNUJA's system. Now we are discussing some metaphysical aspects, especially the concept of God in RāMāNUJā, because it is especially important, more important than Shankara's system, because Shankara's philosophy is as much about metaphysical and spiritual as about theological. But RāMāNUJā is basically theology, except that he doesn't pronounce anything like the finality of Christ as in Christianity. He doesn't say. But he certainly implies that his idea of God is certainly superior to all other concepts of God. Sriman Narayana, Vishnu, and reaching Vaikuntha, more like the heaven of the mainstream Catholic tradition, So the heavenly abode of angels and God living there and coming closer to God and having His grace and all that. So RāMāNUJā talks about, for example, this Sālokyam, Samīpyam, Sārupyam and Sāyujyam. You go to the world of God, the abode of God, and being close to Him, and in some ways having some of His characteristics. And of course, Sāyujya aspect, becoming one with Him, not exactly as in Advaita, but somewhat between Dvaita and Advaita. So RāMāNUJā talks about being one with, realizing the presence of the divine as the inner being, but not total identity as you find in Advaita. But that's perhaps one important area of difference between the higher mystical dimensions of Christianity and RāMāNUJA's system. Otherwise, you find a lot of similarity with Spinoza's mysticism and RāMāNUJA's system. Now we are coming to the subject. Okay, I can interestingly, a historical incident should be mentioned here. It's a real thing. It really happened in RāMāNUJA's life. To get a practical implication of this idea that his idea of God is superior to other ideas. So that's why that's where you find the glory and the greatness of Advaita. Now, towards the end of his life, at some point, RāMāNUJA's followers, all the great devotees, the devotees of Vishnu, or Sriman Narayana, were persecuted by a king of that kingdom. It's called Kulotunga. He was a Shaivite king. He thought Shiva is the greatest God or greater than Vishnu. That was his idea. And this king managed to convert many of the Vaishnavites, the followers of RāMāNUJā, into Shaiva system by forcing them to admit that Shiva is greater than Vishnu. So, now, it appears that according to some historical records, which are not entirely without some foundation, the local king, he was searching for Ramanuja to catch hold of him and to force him to write on some kind of palm leaf. And when his ministers went to Ramanuja with that instrument with which you write on palm leaf, and Ramanuja was asked. Of course, they could not get him because he escaped incognito. But anyway, when they reached Ramanuja's home, some of his prominent followers had already informed him beforehand, and so he managed to escape. But one of his disciples impersonated himself as Ramanuja, just like him, and finally they found out that this was not real Ramanuja, and Ramanuja actually escaped to a place called Melkote, that is in the present Karnataka state of India. It is in Melkote, the place called Melkote. It's close to Mysore. And Ramanuja's followers also migrated with him, and he built a wonderful temple of Lord Vishnu there, one aspect of Vishnu. And that continues to be a very important place where a lot of his old manuscripts are still being preserved. They have also published, it seems, a number of his books. So Ramanuja was a great devotee. So his devotion took him to this extreme idea that Vishnu or Shiva Narayana is the supreme God. Of course, he never criticized. You never find any criticism of Shiva or any other deities in Ramanuja's books. You never find. He doesn't explicitly state that, any kind of finality of the exclusive belief that Vishnu is the only God. He never stated that. But he believed the Shiva Narayana as the idea, the supreme idea of God. So this is an interesting thing. It's a real historical event. Now, you can, to understand, to get an idea of Advaita, suppose the same king had approached Shankaracharya. You tell me the Shiva is there. Shankaracharya could have easily taken a copy of one of his innumerable hymns that he wrote in praise of Shiva. That's an interesting thing. Ramanuja could not show anything to the king to show that he was not adverse to Shiva or Shaivism. Shankara could have shown to the king any number of his own devotional hymns, either praising the Divine Mother, Adityam Bigam Vishnum, Gananatham Maheswaram, Panja Yajnavaro Nityam, Grihastha Panja Pujiyit. Shankaracharya established this Panchadevata Puja, means every householder should worship in his home the Divine Mother, and also the Son, God conceived as the effulgent Son, and also Vishnu, Shiva, and Ganapati. Now again, but remember, all these are different names that we call to indicate the same supreme, transcendental, immanent reality. That also is emphasized in all of Shankaracharya's devotional hymns. But Ramanuja's followers had to escape because they could not admit that Shiva as a place in religion. So this is an interesting incident. And the king later had to face a lot of trouble because he persecuted these Sattvic devotees of Ramanuja. Ramanuja himself had to escape from his kingdom. The kingdom eventually, within 200 years, the kingdom actually collapsed. There were invasions from the north. So that's an interesting thing. I'm just giving an example, one aspect. It's not directly linked to metaphysics, but it is a historical fact. Now coming to the subject. Now, in all these Vedantic systems, you find this Tattwamayanandaji, these three important principles. That is Jiva, Jagat, Ishvara, we call it. In Ramanuja system also. The individual soul, the phenomenal world, and the idea of God. This general topic. In Shankaracharya's system, the highest experiential reality of God is one divine principle, one divine being which is omnipresent, present everywhere, all pervading, immanent, present in everything, and transcendental. Everything else is not entirely non-existent, but not absolutely real, because they belong to the realm of changing realities, apekshika satta. It means vyavakarika satta. So God is not unreal in Shankaracharya Advaita system. The idea of a personal God is transcended when we evolve in our spiritual evolution to a higher state. It is not rejected, but the idea, the God whom we worship at a higher level of our own spiritual experience, that God is perceived to be one divine reality present everywhere. So there is no rejection of the personal God in Advaita. That's one major problem when you listen to people who have no access to the original text. And they read some translations, they say Shankaracharya said God is unreal. I am God, Aham Brahmasmi. So these are absolutely laughable, ridiculous examples of reductionism or maybe misinterpretation. So Shankaracharya said, all ideas of God, including Ramanuja's Srimad Narayana, is real. But in your own spiritual evolution, when you go beyond, you feel that it is not absolutely necessary for you to visit a temple and bow down to the deity in order to experience his reality, in order to have the highest spiritual experience. Again, it's not a concept. It's not an idea. It is only an experience. But at the same time, all these greatest Advaitins were also regularly worshipping, doing puja, chanting the devotional hymns. At the same time, they believed that the absolute reality transcends all this, is beyond all this. So that's an important thing. In Ramanuja's system, on the other hand, Ramanuja says God has certain attributes. Vaikuntha, the place where he lives. And then God has, Ramanuja totally rejected the Advaitin's idea that God is attributeless. He believed that God has attributes. We will discuss that in the light of many quotations from Ramanuja's own books like Vedanta Deepa, Sri Bhashya, which are very important books, and also Gita Bhashya. And so Ramanuja rejects the Advaitin's idea of God as Nirguna and Nirvishesha. And he also says that unlike the Advaitins, contrary to what Advaitins try to assert, God can be known through pramanas. So there is one principle in Advaita, Sarva Pramanavati. The highest reality, the experience is beyond all tools of epistemology, all tools of knowledge. Perception, inference, analogy, comparison, presumption, negation, and so these are 6 pramanas. Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Sabda, Arthavati, Anubalabdhi. In Ramanuja system, in mainstream Vedantic philosophy, Ramanuja, of course, accepts some of them. Again, another important thing. When we go to the most important of the philosophical, metaphysical works in Vedantic tradition, called Brahma Sutras, where Shankaracharya, at the very beginning, he implies this in the first sutra, Adhado Brahma Jignasa, then Janmadeshyataha Shastra Yonitva. In these 2 sutra, bhashyas, Shankaracharya says, Brahman, of course, can be indirectly denoted by Satchidananda as existence knowledge, bliss. But then it doesn't constitute an ultimate definition of the reality. If you define something, then it becomes limited. So, if Brahman is infinite, it should be beyond definition and description. So, Vachama Kocharam, beyond words and beyond mind. So, at the same time, in the Brahma Sutras, in the commentaries of all Vedantins, they often refer to this Satchidananda. Now, Ramanuja says, this Satchidananda is actually the Lakshana. It is the indication. It amounts to a definition of Brahman. This is what Ramanuja says. Shankaracharya says, it is only Tatastha Lakshana, an indirect or remote indication. Because Brahman cannot be defined, but you can get an idea of what Brahman is. So you can say it is the supreme, the highest existence, knowledge and bliss. And Ramanuja, according to Ramanuja, in his own words, which he makes which is a powerful statement in the Sribhashya, in Ramanuja's own Bhashya, Sudarshana Suri wrote a great commentary on this Brahma Sutra, Bhashya of Ramanuja. There's an interesting story. About 150 years later, after writing this book, the famous temple in South India, is a huge temple complex. That is a Srirangam temple. It was attacked by Malik Kafur, the Muslim invader. And he destroyed many temples. Not the granite stones he could not destroy, but whatever possible he destroyed, and he massacred, he put to genocide many people. And Sudarshana Suri was one of those who were killed in that genocide. And Vedanta Deshika, who was a contemporary, he was a disciple of Ramanuja, he managed to save Sudarshana Suri's children and also this book, the remaining manuscript. That is the commentary on the commentary of Ramanuja on Brahma Sutras, super commentary, so to speak. So, these are all interesting things for people to remember, Anyway, now, according to Ramanuja, he talks about his idea of God. Achindya vividha rachanasya niyata deshakala phalabhoga brahmadistamba paryanta kshetraknyamisrasya jagata yasma sarveshwarat nikhila heya pratiniga surupa satyasankalpat jnananandadi ananta kalyana guna sarvajnat sarvashaktehe paramakarunikat parasmat pumsaha srishtisthiti pralayaha pravartante tad brahma idi sutrartha. So, what is Brahman? According to Ramanuja, Brahman is nothing but that supreme person, that is Paramakārunikat, Parasmat, Pumsaka, means from that supreme reality, who is the ruler of all. Now, it's very, very similar to the Christian mystical tradition. And then that God is the totality of all the auspicious qualities and characteristics that you can possibly imagine. He's antagonistic to all evil, whose purposes come true. Satya Sankalpat. So, actually, everything in this world is a Sankalpa. Now, what is Sankalpa? Sankalpa is a thought that flashes in your mind without any previous effort or without any purpose. And that becomes real. So that is why anyone whose thoughts immediately become a reality. So God creates His world through Sankalpa. That is, Satya Sankalpa is one of the terms used in RāMānuja system to the Supreme Saguna Sakara, I mean the supreme reality, God, who has a form, who has attributes, who has qualities and characteristics, who is with form, contrary to Advaiti's concept of formless. Again, you have to remember, this also, there is a very, very intricate things that you have to understand when we study Indian philosophy. That's why many of these philosophical ideas were transmitted from generation to generation of teachers. So, for example, the word in Sanskrit nirguna or nirakara or nirvishesha or apaurushaya means beyond form, beyond qualities and characteristics, beyond attributes. That's a real meaning. But the that kind of prefix is called one of the upasargas. It can also mean devoid of. But in Vedanta philosophy, it doesn't mean devoid of. See, for example, nirakara, without form, is the standard English translation. But in Vedanta philosophy, it means beyond any limitations in terms of attributing a form. Suppose you say God as this form, you are limiting the idea of God. So God can be with form and also without form. So Sri Ramakrishna says in the Gospel, for example. That's one of the first corrections that Sri Ramakrishna gives to his own disciple, the chronicler of Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, Yam. Sri Ramakrishna asked Yam, what idea of God, what concept of God do you follow? He said he would rather have the idea of God without form, the formless. The formless in English means devoid of form, without a form. But then the language has its problem, So you cannot write a paragraph to express the idea of every single Sanskrit word. But Nirakara actually in Vedanta philosophy, it means it is beyond any conditioning in terms of a form or quality or characteristics. So when Yam told Sri Ramakrishna, Mahendranath, I believe in God without form, Sri Ramakrishna said, that's okay, but you should not be fanatic, dogmatic about it. God also can have a form. So this is the real Advaita. That's why in Shankaracharya's works, he was going about preaching this Advaita. And he was also going about writing hymns on God with forms everywhere. In all the temples that he installed, he established forms of worship, puja, all this. So this is a real meaning. So that's a problem of translation, of course. So you have to remember. Now, very often, when you find in RāMāNUJā system, we'll come to some of those interesting things. Sometimes, polemics and dialectics can be a great entertainment for those who can enjoy it. That's very interesting. So RāMāNUJā says, this God, Brahman, it possesses infinite auspicious qualities, like Satchidananda, knowledge, bliss, absolute. So RāMāNUJā says, these are the distinct attributes of God. Shankaracharya says, they are not necessarily the attributes of Brahman. So, a rope could be mistaken to be many things if there is not enough light. In the Advaita tradition, the examples are given. A rope can be mistaken to be a sarpa, jaladhara, bhuchidra and danda. See, a thin rope of snake lying in a dim lit room where there is not enough light, you may mistake that rope for a dark colored snake, maybe a thin stream of water flowing on the crack of a floor, bhuchidra. maybe a curved piece of stick. So, or any of these could be superimposed on that piece of rope. So, like that, so long as you are yet to realize the highest Advaitic experience, you will assume the Satchidananda, mean existence, knowledge, absolute, are the distinct characteristics of God. But when you cross beyond that boundary of form and characteristics, then you realize, and that realization cannot be explained, it can only be intensely felt, that God, the absolute reality is Brahman, cannot have any limitations in terms of name, form, attributes or anything. This is the essence of Advaita. So just a very interesting idea. Again Ramanuja says, of course this is also from Sutra Bhashya, Brahma Shabdena cha Subhavataka Nirasta Nikhila Doshaka Anavati Adishaya Kalyana Guna Purushottamaha Abhidiyate. So who is God? He's a Purushottama, the supreme person, the most auspicious person. That is Nirasta Nikhila Dosha, devoid of, free from any kind of limitations or drawbacks or anything negative. By its very nature, that supreme person is devoid of or free from all imaginable kinds of evils, and is also the repository of infinite qualities, auspicious qualities, beyond imagination, beyond concept. So in other words, God is the totality of all that is auspicious and good. In this respect, perhaps Ramanuja's idea of God comes very close to the idea of God in mainstream Christianity, especially in mystical traditions. So there are striking similarities between these two traditions. So again, of course, there are some other important points of difference that is linked to the Sutra, Brahma Sutra commentaries. Ramanuja wrote his commentary in the 13th century, maybe late 11th century, early 13th century, and Shankaracharya wrote in 8th century. So roughly there is 400 years of difference. Now in Shankara's system, he makes it very clear that those who have got certain spiritual qualities that make them fit to study and understand Vedanta, they are fit for studying Vedanta. There is no need for you to study the early portion of the Vedas in order to qualify to study the later portion. The later portion of Vedanta is Uttaramimamsa or Vedanta or Upanishads, Advaita, etc. The early part of Veda is Puramimamsa, mostly Karmakandas and Brahmanas. So you have to keep an idea of these Vedas as a structure. Vedas are mainly, broadly speaking, two levels or two layers. The previous and later, Purva and Uttara. So the early part of Vedas consists of rituals, certain practices, certain disciplines, and also some hymns that you chant when you perform these rituals. It's called Karma Mimamsa or Purva Mimamsa. Samhitas and Brahmanas constitute the bulk of this, and many parts of Aranyaka also. But Aranyaka is something closer to Upanishads. So according to many traditional scholars, Vedantins, pre-Shankarite Vedantins. They were, you have to remember, they were Vedantins before Shankaracharya also. So, Bodhayana and others, actually Bodhayana Vritti was Ramanuja's role model, and he travelled all the way from extreme south of India to Kashmir to get a copy, the only copy that is available in India at that time, the manuscript Bodhayana Vritti, which is actually a commentary on the entire Vedanta Sutras. That is Jaimini Sutras, Purvamimamsa Sutras, more than 4,000 sutras, and Badarayana Sutras, about 554 sutras. So Bodhayana written an extensive vritti, a glose, a kind of a commentary. And Ramanuja went all the way to Kashmir to get a copy, and he got a copy, and he wrote his Brahma Sutra Bhashya as ordained by his own guru, Yamunacharya, who gave this indication before he passed away. So Ramanuja differs from Shankaracharya's idea as to who is the right person to study this higher spiritual knowledge, or Vedanta, or Brahmamimamsa, or the inquiry in search of the highest reality. Shankaracharya says, if you have got 4 important qualities, then you are okay. You may be from anywhere in the world. You may have studied Sanskrit or Vedas or anything, or you may not have. But if you have got these 4 qualities, now if you study the spiritual psychology behind the concept of these 4 qualities, called sadhana chatushtaya sampatti, the wealth of these 4 important spiritual disciplines, then you are ready for the highest spiritual inquiry. You need not have studied the entire early part of Karmakanda Vedas. Now, what are these which are already discussed? It is discussed in many books, but you find this most systematic description in the Vivekachudamani, which we discussed many times. It is, in Sanskrit, it is called Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka Iha Amutra Phalabhoga Viraga Shamadhi Sakka Sambati Mumukshutvam. Then naturally comes Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. I shall try to explain this. When do we go in search of some higher transcendental spiritual value? Not when we are satisfied with what is available around us. You have got everything going on fine for you, and you are maybe a rich person, a big professional, all wonderful things with you. Still you feel a nagging want, nagging pain within you, a kind of a vacuum to be filled. And then you inquire into something. Adhado Brahma Jignasa, that is in Brahma Sutra, Adhado Dharma Jignasa in Jaimini Sutras. Adha Yoganushāsanam you find in Yoga Sutra. So Adha means now onwards. So I'm looking for something higher. Jaimini says, well, those who want to live an ethical life in this world without much spiritual pretensions, they want to perform some rituals, some spiritual practices. But Shankaracharya says, those who are going in search of, those who inquire into these higher spiritual truths, they should have already had these, or they have established themselves in these 4 important prerequisites. One is, they should be able to say, enough, I don't want any of these things in this world. And I don't want anything even in next life. You should not have even a desire to go to heaven if you want to study Brahma Vidya or the transcendental spiritual knowledge of Vedanta. We need not have even a desire to go to heaven and enjoy God's company. If you want to go understand our own true nature. So no desire for anything in this world, and no desire for anything after death. Ihamutra Bhalabhoga Viraga. That is first one. But before that, this is second. Before that, something is important. What is that? First of all, you should be convinced there are many wonderful things in this world, but they are all anitya, they are all impermanent, they are transient. They come and go. Friends, money, wealth, job, everything comes, health, everything comes and goes. So there should be something that doesn't go away, that remains there all the time, nitya. So a proper discerning wisdom to identify what is nitya, what is eternal, what is permanent, and to uphold that. And a discerning wisdom to reject what is impermanent, what is transient. And you should be able to reject it. So what is the real, the eternal, the permanent, we should uphold that. And what is impermanent and non-eternal, transient, we should reject that. That's the beginning. But then, this is the first. The second one I already mentioned, they come together. And once you reach this, oh, enough of this, I go for something else. When we do this, suddenly we find a lot of good qualities, good practices, good characteristics we unconsciously develop. It is called Samadhi Shatka Sampatti, 6 characteristics. Shama, Dhamma, Uparadi, Tidiksha, Shraddha, Samadhana. I discussed this on many occasions, the early part of Advaita lectures. Mental restraint, restraining the senses, and also withdrawing the senses from external sense objects. And also forbearance, we should be able to practice patience and forbearance on the face of difficulties. And also a sense of sanctity and sacredness, Shraddha, and Samadhanam, and concentration on higher values. So these are very, very important things for a person to develop if he really wants to study Vedanta books. Even to intellectually get interested in reading these higher books, we need a little bit of all these qualities. Otherwise, we may be more inclined to read something that will excite the senses, that will, some stand-up comedies, really, because that's what, nothing to learn from that, but to sit and study and think and contemplate on what's the purpose of human existence, human life. Is this world all that's there, or is there something beyond that? So, even in order to study Plato's Republics, we should be able to restrain our mind from watching the Terminator series. Otherwise, you cannot go to a library and get a copy of the Republic. Impossible. So, even to read intellectually, to be interested in higher books, a little bit of these qualities are needed. The fourth quality is mumukshutvam. That's a much higher one. An urge for liberation. This could happen at different levels, in different degrees. To realize and understand, at least intellectually, something that really matters in life. Something that gives us a sense of meaning in our life. That is mumukshutvam. So, it literally means a desire, an urge for spiritual enlightenment and liberation. And then comes 3 other ones which are related, Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, which are linked to our practices. Then you listen to something, means you may read and understand, whatever way you connect your mind with some higher ideas and then ponder over the inner meaning, contemplate on the meaning, mananam. And nididhyasana, try to internalize all this. Without this, no one will be able to make any use of Vedanta. Now remember, one may ask this question. So I don't have all this. We have all of, most of us, we have little bit of that. Otherwise, nobody will have the patience to listen to these classes even. There is absolutely no comedy, nothing. Actually, when you watch a comedy, you want to escape from yourself. A person who goes for entertainment all the time, they're trying to run away from their own mind. So every desire for entertainment is an attempt to run away from, escape from our own mind. But to seriously study and listen to and think over higher things, we need to evolve a little, we have to take our mind to a higher level. Then only we will be able to study Vedanta. Now Ramanuja is not very particular about these things. Ramanuja doesn't mention in his own commentaries on the early part of the Vedanta Deepa, which is a small book, and also in Sri Bhashya also. He doesn't go very elaborately about this sadhana chatushtaya sambhati, but we have to understand Ramanuja himself was a man of all these qualities. That's an important thing. Because these qualities are for everyone. Anyone who wants to study the Sermon on the Mount, the Dhammapada, or any of these devotional literature in any tradition, will have some of these good qualities. Without that, we will not take to higher mysticism or spiritual books. Impossible. So remember, this is universal. And it is Shankara should be credited with this clear statement as to who can and will go to Vedanta or higher spiritual contemplation and thinking. This is an important thing to understand. Now, in the Gita Bhashya, he says, now we come to his idea of God. Gita Bhashya, he makes this very clear. Mahaishwaryasya Krishnasya Jagataha Sudekaiga Desena Asraya Bhudam Krishnasya Pravartaitaram Cha Asharyatama Ananta Jnanadi Ananta Kalyana Gunagana, etc. This is how a possessor, somebody who possesses all the auspicious attributes, like Ananta Jnanadi. Ananta means infinite knowledge, omniscience. And again, the one who creates this world, the one who regulates this world, the one who operates this machine of the world. Krishnasya Jagataha Pravartaitaram. So Ramanuja and also says Asaya Bhudam. Actually, the entire cosmos is dependent upon this Ishvara, God. And God is actually operating this machine of the world. How? Through his Aishwarya, through his innumerable, indescribable, infinite qualities and characteristics. He is controlling this world, and he has got this infinite knowledge, infinite compassion, infinite qualities. And Ananta Jnanadi Kalyana Gunagana means he has a host of a huge repository of all the auspicious qualities and characteristics. And that God is Sriman Narayana. This is the essence of Ramanuja system. I shall try to explain one more point, then we'll conclude, because this is a bit dialectical, but it's very interesting. Another important aspect of Ramanuja's concept of God. I should try to explain this in the light of some other important books, especially the Brahma Sutra Bhashya. There is one important commentary, one part in his commentary, that is on the sutras, that is Trayanameva Chaivam Upanyasa Prasnaha, Prasnascha. So, it actually talks about three important things to be known in this world, in our spiritual life. It has got a remote reference to Kathopanishad. Now, if you look at the Kathopanishad, you find Nachiketa is the main protagonist of Kathopanishad. It's from Krishna Yajurveda. Nachiketa was a small boy, and one day he found his father was performing a ritual. The most important part of the ritual was giving away all his wealth. And in ancient times, one of the most important part of the wealth was cows. So this man, Vajasrava, that was his father's name, he was a sage. He was playing a trick. So in the name of giving away cows, he was giving away all sorts of old cows, which won't give milk, which won't drink water, which won't eat grass. That is, you can find the Kathopanishad at the beginning itself. So, and the boy got excited and he went to his father, "Why are you doing this? And after all, I am your only son. I am also your wealth. Most prominent wealth of a father is his son or only son. To whom are you going to give me?" Because the ritual included giving away all the most precious wealth of the person. And 3 times this boy repeated this question. Kasmai mam dasasidi, dutiyam trudiyam sahovaja, murtivetvam dadamidihi. That's all. This is a dialogue. So he asked, "To whom are you going to give me as a gift?" 3 times he asked. The father got angry. "Well, I am going to give you death. I am going to make a gift of you to the Lord of Death." Nachiketa wanted to make sure that whatever his father uttered should become true. Because if he doesn't do what he promised to give, then he would be a liar. So Nachiketa starts his journey to the Lord of Death. This is a story. Now, okay, this much only, just background. When he reached the palace of the Lord of Death, he was not there. Yama was not there. Yama was the name of the Lord of Death. So Yama returned after some days, 3 days, and then Yama told the little boy who was waiting for him for 3 days, as a compensation, as a penance for making you wait for 3 days without food, I shall give you 3 boons. You can ask any 3 boons. And Nachiketa asked for 3 boons. So, and in the discussion you find Agni, Jiva, Atma. These are 3 things that are mentioned in this 3 boons. First, of course, Nachiketa asked for when I go back to my home, my father should not be angry. Shanta Sankalpa Sumanayada Syad Vidamanyam Gautamama Abhimurtyu to Prasistama Abhivadet Prasida Edatrayanam Prathamam Baramprani. My first boon is when I get back to my home, my father should not be angry. Yama said, "Okay, fine." The second boon is about some kind of Agni Vidya, some fire ritual, Homa, something like that will give him the blessing of going to heaven. That also Yama immediately granted. The third boon is Ayam Pratik Viśiṣṭā Manusye Astityege Manayam Astidijege Edad Vidya Manusishtastoyaham Varanamesha Varastratiyaka. This particular mantra becomes the focus of discussion in the RāMāNUJA system. So, Ayam Prete Viśiṣṭā Manusye, he quotes that mantra. And then RāMāNUJA says, Nachiketa is asking for the nature of the reality. Whether at the time of death we will merge with the Lord or we will remain separate. What will be the kind of liberation that happens? In the RāMāNUJA system, you have to remember, Sayujyam is the ultimate liberation, state of liberation. Sayujyam means not total identity with Brahman. In mainstream Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, Brahmavid Brahmaiva Bhavati. When you realize Brahman, you become one with that. That's the highest level of spiritual experience. Jiva Brahmaikyam, the unity of Jivatman and Paramatman, individual soul and universal soul. That's the highest realization, moksha, in Advaita. But in Viśiṣṭādvaita, you still remain separate. You remain as a great devotee. You live in God, close proximity with God. You will have the same auspicious form, but you will not become one with it. It's called Sayujyam. So RāMānuja's commentary is frequently quoted. Rāmānuja says, at the end of our spiritual evolution, spiritual sadhanas, the distinction between God and Jiva, individual soul, that distinction is still retained and maintained. That's why he says, Asmin prakarane yeyam prede vijiksa manushye. That is Kadhopanishad quotation. He quotes, Rāmānuja quotes, Ityarabhya asamaptehe upasya upasana upasakanam trayanameva evam nyeyatvena upanyasaha prasnascha drishyate. He says, so upasaka means the spiritual seeker. Upasana means spiritual disciplined practices. Upasya is the object of realization. I mean, God is the upasya, upasaka is the jiva, the individual soul, and upasana is the spiritual discipline. So, they remain separate. There is no identity of upasaka and upasya. There is no identity with jiva and Brahman in Rāmānuja's system. Because Rāmānuja says very clearly, he makes a statement, Ashesha chit achit prakaram brahmaigameva tattvam tatra prakara prakarinohu prakaranam cha mitha atyanta bhedi api Viśiṣṭādhi vivakshaya ekatva vyapadeshaga tad idara nishedascha. So remember, in Vedanta, in mainstream Vedanta, it is they accept Swarupa Aikyam. In reality, Jiva is the same as Brahman. In reality means what? The supreme reality as Atman is present in all of us. But when you think of the Jiva devoid of the body-mind complex, all the limiting adjuncts, then the Jiva is the same as Ishvara, as Brahman. Now, Rāmānuja doesn't accept that. He says, Chit achit prakaram brahma ashesha chit achit prakaram brahmaigameva tattvam tatra prakara prakarinohu prakaranam cha mitha atyanta bhedi api Viśiṣṭādhi vivakshaya. So Viśiṣṭaikyam, Rāmānuja's system is called the unity. Viśiṣṭaikyam means the world, the Jagat and Jivas are conditioning the oneness of Brahman. It means Chit, Brahman conditioned by Chit and Achit. Chit or Jivas, Achit the phenomenal world. These two together conditioned, or condition, modify, maybe another word, condition, better word, conditioned Brahman. So Brahman conditioned Viśiṣṭādvaita. Brahman conditioned by Chit and Achit. That is Viśiṣṭādvaita. Anyway, we will discuss this again in the next class. Very, very interesting discussion we will have based on other important works of the Rāmānuja tradition. The works of Sudarsana Suri, his commentary on the Brahma Sutra Bhashya, and also Vedanta Deshika's commentary on Gita Bhashya and others. So we'll discuss later. So you can have discussion now. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Prajwal has departed and asked me to post the question and answer.
Yeah.
I'm scanning YouTube, so if there are people there who want to post a question, I will see it, and I see David has raised his hand, so
Yeah.
David is first.
Yeah, yeah.
Hello, Swami.
Yeah.
Question is, you mentioned something today, and I didn't quite understand what is Ramanuja's solution to the problem of good and evil. In Advaita, good and evil are all one. There is no such thing as all good or all evil. It's all merges into one. But in Ramanuja's philosophy, how does he resolve the problem of good and evil, especially of evil? If God is all blessed qualities.
Yeah, of course, Ramanuja accept the reality of evil. I mean, but it's not exactly the theory of evil that you find in the Abrahamic tradition with the devil, some kind of anthropomorphic evil, responsible Antichrist, who is, John Milton's Paradise Lost, The Beelzebub, the devil was rebelling against God, he was thrown from there and that. You don't find anything similar to that. But Ramanuja, of course, he believes in Naraka, in Papa and all that. So, sinful deeds, wrong things that people do, then they may be destined to go to a difficult place after death, and then after suffering from there, they will be born again. That's there. I shall try to explain this in the context of Advaita. Advaita also accepts the reality of evil, but Advaita doesn't give an anthropomorphic interpretation to evil. That's the only difference. So, a person who thinks he is a physical body and he wants to enjoy, he doesn't believe in anything beyond pratyaksha pramana, beyond what is visible before him. His main focus will be worldly material pleasures. So he will do evil things. If that person understands gradually, at some point, if he understands that all these things that he is struggling for physical enjoyment, these are impermanent, they are just transient. So when he becomes more and more knowledgeable, he becomes less and less evil. So the reality of evil is accepted, but there is no anthropomorphic interpretation. Anthropomorphism is absent in Advaita, but in Ramanuja system it is there. It is very prominently found in Madhva system, but there is a very huge muscular interpretation of the concept of evil, Naraka, and Nitya Naraka and all. But Ramanuja doesn't go that far. But he accepts the reality of people prompted by wrong samskaras, doing evil things. But they also, when they turn to God, eventually bhakti, or devotion, and eventually if they reach prapatti, they also will get liberation. As Ramanuja says, yeah.
Does Ramanuja think that both good and evil come from God? Like, where does evil come from?
Yeah. Ramanuja's system doesn't analyze that. So Ramanuja's system doesn't analyze where the evil comes from. Remember that actually these thought systems were later outlined in post-Augustinian period, but it didn't go beyond that because Augustine put a full stop the whole thing, radical sinfulness of man. Ramanuja's system did not focus on that. The later works of Ramanuja's system mostly focused on bhakti, on prapatti and those aspects, Vedanta Desika and others. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Swami.
Thank you. He talks about samskaras as responsible. But where does samskara come from? He cannot really go beyond that, go back. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah, thank you.
Vijay had your Vijay, you had your hand up and took it down.
Yeah.
Hariom, Namaste Swamiji.
Namaste.
So I'm understanding from you in Viśiṣṭādvaita, there is no Nirakara Nirguna Brahman. if I understood you right. And the second question is, so looks like there is no Maya.
Yeah, no Maya. No, absolutely no. He outright denies Maya. Okay, there is a fundamental problem, and I would be doing an injustice to both Ramanuja and Shankara if I don't explain this. See, first of all, Ramanuja doesn't accept the fundamental thesis in Advaita, that is, dividing reality into Paramarthika, Vyavaharika, Pratibhasika gradation. For example, Ramanuja's in his Brahmasutra Bhashya, Mahapurva Paksha and Mahasiddhanta, he talks about this Sapta, the Anubhavattivada, means 7 untenables. I discussed this earlier when I was discussing Advaita. Sapta Anubhavattivada. See, for example, he says Brahman cannot be called indescribable or anirvachaniya, so anirvachaniya anubhavati. And he says the Maya cannot obscure Brahman, and if Maya obscure Brahman, the Brahman is not so wonderful or anything. So, Tirodhana anubhavati. Then Nivartaka, then there is no such thing as avidya going away, and there is no such thing as avidya is totally destroyed. So Nivartaka anubhavati, Nivarti anubhavati. You find Ramanuja very interesting. All this stem from one fundamental principle. In Shankara's system, Paramarthika Satta, the absolute reality, is that which is never born and therefore which never dies. Trikala Atida. Shadvikara Atida. That which is never born, that which never exists. Because existence itself, at empirical level, existence means a transition from a state of empirical non-existence into a state of empirical existence. You make a pot. The pot did not exist before you made a pot. So a child is born, the child did not exist before he was born. Like that, all these changes, Jayade, Asti, Vardhade, Parinamade, Apakshiyade, Vinasidi, all the 6 changes, they exist only at the Vyavaharika level. And that Vyavaharika Satta is changing reality. It is changing. It's an influx. It is not absolutely unreal, but it is not absolutely real. It is not absolutely unreal because we are facing it. We are seeing this world in front of us. So it cannot be absolutely unreal. But we are not seeing the world the same way for thousands of years, billions of years. The world won't remain the same. So it is not absolutely real. Why? Because anything to be called absolutely real, Paramarthika Satta, should be beyond 6 changes, beyond change in the 3 levels of consciousness, Jagra, Swapna, Sushupti. Ramanuja doesn't listen to these things. Remember that. The problem with Ramanuja is, he doesn't even understand the basic distinction between avidya and asat. Whenever you talk about mithya, he is talking about asat. See, Shankaracharya says there is such a thing as asat, which you can even conceive of intellectually. And he gives the example, Vandhyaputra, Shashabhishana, Gandharvanagara. Even if you look at the word itself denies its existence. A city in the sky. If it is a city, it cannot be in the sky. If it is sky, there cannot be city. So the word itself denies its existence. As Shankara says it is asat. And he says the world is not asat. Shankaracharya says the world is not asat. It is real, but not in the absolute sense. It is simple common sense. So you find, I tell you, I gave this funny statement earlier. Ramanuja was crying and weeping when his guru, who was teaching in Advaita, Yadava Prakasha, somebody, who was teaching Advaita. There is a well-known mantra in the Chandogya Upanishad, which it's very. And Ramanuja said, in the Bhashya compares God's eyes with some other animals thing. Then the point is, he could have straight away gone to Kanchi Kamakshi temple. That was the place where Shankaracharya stood and prayed and recited Saundarya Lahari. There is not one great temple in India which was not sanctified by Shankaracharya. So, again, Ramanuja's system, it is surprising and very shocking. He never refers to any of Shankaracharya's stotras, devotional hymns. Interesting. And how many? More than 68. 68 very prominent devotional hymns. Shankaracharya was a greater devotee than Ramanuja, to be very frank. I don't think Ramanuja could have written one line comparable to the poetry of Shankaracharya, Ananda Lahari, Saundarya. Do you think he would have written one line? No. No. None of the so-called devotional philosophers could have written anything comparable to what Shankara wrote. I'm talking about devotional poetry. And then so when Shankaracharya says that the world is unreal, what he means is the world is not real in the absolute sense. But he also says the world is not unreal in the absolute sense. There is only one philosophical system in India which tells you the world is absolutely unreal. That is Buddhist. There is one school, it's called Pravatti Vijnana. In the Vijnanavada, there are two levels, Alaya Vijnana and Pravatti Vijnana. In one school of Buddhist Vijnanavada school, Dignaga school, they deny the existence of the empirical world. Total denial. That's all. I often tell you, Ramanuja could have walked a few miles from his Sri Perumbudur and went to Kanchipuram. And he could have seen the very temple where Shankaracharya actually installed a Sri Chakra. Then he would have all this. He was crying and weeping when his teacher, who was himself, had a very, very inaccurate interpretation of Advaita. That's an important thing. And he got excited. Anyway, it's a very interesting story. Okay, thank you. But remember, Ramanuja was a great humanist, he was a great devotee. That fact should be kept in mind. He was a great devotee and great humanist. Yeah, namaste.
Thank you. Sanjay, you're next.
Maharaj, the question,
Yeah.
maybe you may want to kind of explain
Yeah.
how Ramanujacharya explained the concept of Brahman. Did he say it's the same as Vishnu that he describes? And that's one pretext. So the second comment is, all of these, when I look at Advaita Shankara's commentaries, it is very experiential.
Yeah.
Where you meditate and you realize the one is, that's where the rope concept, everything comes. So that for me is, okay, Shankaracharya experienced it and he's communicating it that way.
Yeah.
Now, what was the source for Ramanujacharya's description of the different lokas and things? What was the... it doesn't look was it experiential or was it his interpretation of books? What was the source? And maybe you can clarify the concept of Brahman by Ramanuja.
Ramanuja is called Ubhaya Vedanti. Ubhaya means he accepted two schools of verbal testimony, Shastra. One is Vedas, Upanishads, and also the Puranic literature, and also Nalayara Prabandham. That is the teachings of the ancient saints of South India who have written. There were many great saints, they were all devotees. So Ramanuja considered many of the local traditions as authentic and also Puranas as authentic, like Madhvacharya, Vallabha, Nimpa, all of them accept the Puranas. Shankaracharya, on the other hand, says Vedas, Upanishads. So that's why you find so much of universalism in Shankara. Shankara basically, he Upanishads from the foundation. And what do the Upanishads teach? The universal, the one supreme reality, everything. He did not deny, he did not reject. But he said, wherever there is a contradiction between what the Upanishads teach and what the Puranas and other books teach. Then you should give importance to what the Upanishads teach.
Oh, got it.
Now, the point is, so I shall come to this subject. The point is, in Ramanuja's system, he was heavily influenced by Natyamuni, by Yamunacharya, many of the devotional poets. They were great devotees, great spiritual persons, and these saints and sages. And many of them founded their doctrines and theories on the teachings, based on the teachings of the Nayanars, Alvars. Alvars, their Nalayara Prapancham, 4,000 works belonging to the ancient Tamil literature. Tamil was the language in South India, all the 4 states, maybe up to 2nd century, up to 3rd century, up to 5th, 4th century. Tamil was common everywhere. So what happened, these saints were born in different places in South India. So they were great mystics. So they heavily influenced Ramanuja's theology and theology of tradition. It's an important thing. So it's called Ubhaya Vedantin. So he gave a lot of importance to Vishnu Purana. Shankaracharya also refers to the Puranas, but he accepts Puranas only so long as they are in full agreement with what the Upanishads teach. So this Smriti Purananam Vidodho Yatra Dursyate Tatra Sraudam Pramanam Syat Ayodvedi Smridirvara, Vyasa Smriti says. See, Vedas, that is Upanishads, Srutis, the Smritis and Puranas. When there is a contradiction between Smritis and Vedas, you accept the Vedas. When there is a contradiction between Puranas and Smritis, you accept the Smritis. But Vedas, for especially the Upanishads, Veda means the Upanishads. The Upanishads are the foundational text of Indian philosophy and spiritual tradition. Though Shankara is so universal. Ramanuja's system insists on certain forms, external rituals. They have this confession, giving responsibilities. You make this statement, he made very similar to confession in the Catholic Church. The surprising similarity you find, very interesting. You make some statements and immediately. But Shankaracharya is no statements you make. Making statements will help you to make your mind ready to go to a higher level till you internalize that. This is the second. What's the first question you asked?
The description of Brahman, is it same as Vishnu?
That's right. Yeah, it's see, Vaikuntha Gadyam is there. Vaikuntha Gadyam is one of the Gadyatrayam. He wrote 3 Gadyas, smaller books, not as important as Bhashya. Saranagati Gadyam, Vaikuntha Gadyam, and Sriranga Gadyam. So this Vaikuntha Gadyam talks about Saranagati and also these heavens. Vishnu, that's it. Anthropomorphism is good for devotional practices. True, anthropomorphism you give a personal dimension. But from a metaphysical point of view, it's a limitation.
Yes.
So, okay, that's the idea behind.
Thank you, Maharaj. Go ahead, Shay, please.
Namaskar, Swamiji.
Namaste.
My question is, so last session you spoke about Tattwamasi, the Mahavakya, and my recollection of your description was that Tvam, in that case, was sort of the reflection of Brahman in your heart. Is that correct?
Tvam is the jiva, the individual soul. It is the
Yes.
jiva.
Okay. So I guess, you were saying today that Ramanuja believed that the jiva and Brahman never fully unite. So what does he believe then with Tattwamasi?
Yeah, very interesting. So Ramanuja differs from Shankaracharya in one aspect. I will explain this. First, the Advaiting system. What does Advaita say? Tat means that Supreme Brahman, Tvam means the divine spirit within you, the Atman within you. Now, this comes later. When you first tell a person Tattvam, what he understands, that God whom you are worshipping is you yourself. It's literal meaning, apparently. Okay? This should not be accepted they will not be accepted by Advaitins. Anyway, the Sanskrit word is there, which I call, So, the apparent meaning and the real meaning are two different things. See, somebody tells you you are that. So that is the God you are praying to. And you are this name with your wearing this shirt, asking questions, discussing philosophy, Vedanta, this individual beings. That cannot be true. You cannot say, I am sitting here in San Francisco, you say I am God, and I cannot be God. So this meaning is not to be taken. So what's the meaning to be taken? That means not God as the creator, not God with form or attributes, but God the divine principle that is present everywhere, Brahman, Atman, the divine principle present everywhere, supreme reality. That supreme reality is you, but not this not this body-mind complex. But if I can think of myself, divide up my body-mind complex, then I am the divine principle present in me. That divine reality and the all-pervading divine reality are the same. This is a real meaning. So it is called implied meaning. It is called Lakshartha, means implied meaning. So Vedantins stress that only implied meaning should be taken, not obvious meaning, not the meaning that you come, prima facie meaning should not be taken. Now, what does Ramanuja say? Ramanuja doesn't agree with this. Ramanuja doesn't believe that you should go for an implied meaning. It is clear statement, why don't you take it? But in what sense? You and all that around you is an evolute of that God. The God is present in you as an indweller. So everything is an evolute of that God. So all living beings are Chit. All non-living beings constitute Achit, the world, empirical world, etc. Both constitute evolutes of that God. That God creates this from himself. But again, they remain different. They can never be the same. This idea behind. So, liberation according to Ramanuja means sayujyam. That means you go to, you develop devotion, you practice prayer, then after death you go to Vishnu's abode, you stay there, you go to auspicious form Vishnu, you stay there in close proximity with your Lord. It's very similar to, in a way, Christian tradition. So if you read, English translation is available, Augustine, City of God, you can see this and also many of the Christian mystics talk about going to this heaven, being the presence of the Lord. That idea is very, very strongly preached in all mainstream Christian traditions. Ramanuja's system comes very close to that. If you want to get an approximation in Christianity that comes very close to Ramanuja's, it is called Spinoza's devotion, his ecstasy, that higher, that's very similar to Ramanuja's system. Prapatti that you find in Ramanuja, you find in Spinoza also.
Thank you, Maharaj. Mark Goodrich, you're next, please.
Good evening, Maharaj.
Yeah.
This is a question, it's a sadhana question. It's pertaining to your talk on Friday night on the chapter 17 of the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
It came up this evening during my meditation, so I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, please.
You spoke about the different phases of life as people get older, in ancient India, they used to go into the forest, or they would be concentrating on like a spiritual, study and upliftment.
Yeah.
So, in my reading of Sarada Devi, she emphasizes very much work along with japa and meditation.
Yeah.
My question to you is, after someone reaches, say, the age of 65 or maybe gets up into their 70s, is it advisable to continue doing some kind of work for spiritual advancement? That's kind of the message that I'm getting from her, is that work is very important. And one of our Swamis, Swami Vedananda, he's up there in age, and he seems to work constantly, giving lectures and doing other things.
Yeah. He's only 89. He's only 89 years old. Yeah.
Oh, that's all.
Yeah.
So I feel like, well, she keeps saying, you gotta work, you gotta work, you gotta work.
Yeah.
And I just want to get your take on that. In our society here, where we've, done our careers, we've retired, but we still, want to advance in spirituality. Is work necessary for us?
Yeah, I tell you, in our own Ramakrishna order, many Swamis continue to be active. Many of them up to a few months before their death. It's their choice. No one asked them to do that. The point is, it largely depends upon individual choices and preferences. Some want to retire, they are most welcome. Don't mind. And some continue to be active. So Holy Mother emphasized the service. That's because Holy Mother had to face a number of questions from different kinds of devotees and disciples. So Mother gave the instruction according to the taste and temperament, the requirements of the individual spiritual seekers. Some individual spiritual seekers sometimes came a bit lazy. They were dogmatically opposed to any kind of service activity. They want to always meditate. But Mother knew very well that it is impossible for such people to always remain in meditation. A person who says, no, I don't want to work for anyone, I want to meditate, that person will not be able to meditate. Because if he is really able to meditate, then he won't mind doing any service activity. The very fact that he wants to retire from any service activity and to remain in meditation, that shows he will not be able to meditate. So many type of people came to Mother. So Mother gave appropriate instructions depending upon the fitness of the disciples. Some people were always active. Mother used, no, once a while you should go and spend your time in contemplation. But that also Mother said. It depends upon individual choices. So there are people who, and the householder you mentioned, actually Ramakrishna Mission is able to run many institutions largely because of the service activities coming from wonderful spiritual seekers and devotees. It's an important thing to remember. Many people after their retirement, they come to ashrama. They spend their time in being part of the ashrama activities. And after spending a long, 30, 40 years, very active, working maybe 10 hours every day for 50 years or 40 years, when they retire, sometimes they don't mind being more active than they were before retirement. Because this new kind of activity gives them a sense of contentment and serenity that shows they are not working the you put in inverted comma, they are not working as such. They are doing some spiritual sadhana, spiritual discipline. So work itself becomes spiritual discipline. Such people. Such people, they don't feel the need to retire. Being part of a great activity is a spiritual service. Not only that, that helps us to move forward. Remember, any kind of selfless activity, unselfish service, any kind of such activities will produce a lot of sattva-guna in our mind. A mind will be spiritually reinforced and refined and purified by selfless activities. So it can be demonstrated. You can find many people even coming to Vedanta society. Many youngsters who work all the 6 days of the week, 5 days, 6 days a week, they are very active. Today, many youngsters were very active today. They are very active. Vedantaji was going for some activity and they were accompanying him to be with him. He was going to the terrace. They won't let him go alone. They accompanied him. They were so active. Because they don't know, but they don't know Vedanta. They did not know him earlier. But so much of joy you get when you become part of some higher activity. It's a great joy. So such people went to mother. Mother told you remain active. But there were some people who were always working, restless. Such people, mother told them, you go and take rest, contemplate, do some spiritual sadhanas. Depends upon type of people. Remember. So very important. It's a mental system. Anyone can even experiment this. When you are part of some higher noble activity, from which you get nothing, but you feel you get another kind of inner reward that fills our heart. It's an important thing. Shankaracharya says, karmanishthāyaha chitta suddhidvārena purushartha heduttam na swatantriyana jnananishthātu swatantriyana purushartha hedugu anyana apeksha. See, any kind of karma nishtha, any kind of dedicated work from some higher cause, it leads to the natural and inevitable purification of the mind. How do we feel our mind is getting purified? Oh, today I spent 2 hours doing this work. You feel. Even when you think of it, you feel a kind of inner fulfillment. That shows mind is becoming more and more sattvic. Mind is getting more and more purity. That's the idea behind it. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
I see no further questions.
So
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we'll conclude. So we will have a class next week and then we'll have a short interval. Next week we'll have class. Please watch the website savedanta.org. Okay, thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishnaarpanamastu. Namaskar, namaskar, namaskar.
Announce, thank you very much.
Namaskar, 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 namaskar.